Hi, friends. My name is Edie Penn, and welcome to my new podcast, PostScript. This podcast is about the scripts we inherit, the social contracts we internalize, and unspoken rules we live by, sometimes consciously, sometimes without realizing it, and how those things shape what we believe, what we tolerate, and how we move through the arenas of our lives. I'm coming to this conversation as someone who spent over 20 years in human resources. And while so much of what I've learned about these scripts and social constructs that we're slaves to is through that work, I know for sure that it applies to you as a regular, everyday person in your regular, everyday life. I've seen how breaking down these constructs has freed people. In many ways, what I've learned is that some of these normal ideas that we repeat at work and in our relationships, at leadership conferences, as parents, walking through our everyday lives, are actually really harmful scripts in disguise. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. One of the most harmful things about some of these frameworks is that they're presented like truth, not a perspective, not this might work for you if, truth. And the harm of that is, it doesn't even acknowledge that the assumption that this works for everyone is sometimes the very problem. Because if it doesn't apply to you, if you do all the things and your life doesn't suddenly improve, you start thinking that the problem is you, not the framework, not the message, certainly not the messenger, you. You start thinking that you're undisciplined. Maybe you're too broken or too sensitive, too resilient or not resilient enough, this or that, whatever, fill in the blank. When really, the framework was never built with you in mind. It was built for somebody with a different set of permissions, a different kind of body, a different relationship to relationships, to risk, to danger, to authority. And when you try to force those things onto your life, you end up worse than you were before. That's not self-help, friends. That's self-destruction. So the goal of this podcast and how I want you to engage with it is not to take what I say as gospel. God, that's the opposite of what I want you to do. It's to practice discernment. I want you to listen and ask yourself, does this idea make me feel more free or more restrained? Does it expand my thinking or shrink my options? Does it help me feel more like myself, or does it make me feel like I need to be someone else to be good or good enough? I also want you to pay attention to the voice behind that message. Whose perspective is that? What assumptions are they making about your life, your body, relationships, resources, safety, access, your reality? Does it even make sense to you? To be clear, this isn't about me. It's why this podcast will be audio only. Don't get it twisted though. I have a voice for radio and a face for TV. I just don't want you to become an Edie Penn fan. I mean, you can, because I'm fabulous. But the point is not worship. The point is practice. The point is that you get better at thinking for yourself so that you can take what's useful and leave the rest and build something that actually fits your life in community, and not just what sounds good, what's trending, what's on the New York Times bestseller list, what's packaged well, or the latest thing you saw on your IG feed. What's true, what's aligned, and what's for you. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Mother's Day episode of PostScript. My name is Gabrielle, and this show is hosted by my mother. Say hello.
Hello, world. How you doing?
I'm going to be interviewing her, I suppose, about different scripts surrounding motherhood. Most of which she does not subscribe to. I'm already knowing. Anything you want to say before we get started?
First, I want to say thank you. I'm super excited that you agreed to do this with me. I can't wait to hear what your questions are. And just be yourself, and we'll have some fun. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, I suppose a fun game for the listeners will be trying to figure out who's talking. Considering people in our life already don't know the difference between our voices. I feel like we don't sound super similarly, but maybe we have some inflections that match up, probably. Well, mainly because I'm an only child and she's a single mother, so I grew up with somebody who looked exactly like me. So she was my mirror in lots of ways. In face, in attitude. Not so much anymore. I definitely feel like she's more Martian than I am. I really love astrology. I study it voraciously. So I feel like it's how I understand the world and how I understand our relationship also. So she's very much an Aries. And I have some Aries aspects, but I'm not very fiery, I feel. Or maybe I'm growing into it. I don't know.
You're definitely growing into your fieriness. I love it.
I mean, people are always like, yeah, as you age, you like turn into your mother. So I don't know. I've been wondering in which ways that will be true. Have you noticed any ways I've become like you as I've gotten older?
Yeah, I think the way you handle personal interaction has become more along the lines of the kinds of things I would do. And I don't actually know how much of that is observation versus my direct influence through conversation and advice.
I could understand that because I feel like my main obstacle in terms of interpersonal relationships has just been giving too much. I don't know. Like, I feel like I've always been a very compassionate individual, and just allowing that to swallow up the individuality that you kind of need to engage in any type of relationship has been my downfall, Achilles heel, my Sisyphus rock. Yeah. So I guess we'll segue into some questions. So something my mom always says is that she doesn't have a favorite age or era of my life, and that she loves them all equally, or maybe she loves them even more as I get older. And so I figured a decent way to kind of like guide us through this conversation is to go through some pivotal ages throughout a child's life and see what the scripts are surrounding those formative years, see what I was like, and see how she navigated those just in general. She's always been a very... Can I curse?
Yes.
She's always been like, fuck the system. I'm not going to listen to those people. Fuck those people. What do they know? Are you their child? No. So, I mean, we're just going to get into all the different ways that people have given her advice. And she was like, blah.
First of all, I love this idea so much because I feel like the motherhood scripts really do change with each era of your child's age. So yeah, dude, I'm so excited. Let's do it.
Okay, let's begin with infancy. I've seen my fair share of like baby content, you know, what to expect when you're expecting. I figured out what tummy time was recently, and that babies hate it. And even though it's like some type of like physical therapy to develop their neck muscles or something like that, it's crazy. But yeah, I obviously wasn't super sentient during those years. So what was your positioning like?
So infancy is really pivotal because there are a lot of things that happen at that moment that like mothers are actually kind of beat over the head to do when the child is that little, and that I just don't understand. And probably at the top of the list is letting your baby cry themselves to sleep or cry something out. That never made any sense to me. Why would we do that? How is that not just causing trauma? Like, you just spent all of your like life inside this warm place only to be left alone to cry it out. You can't communicate. Your only way of communicating actually at this point is to cry. And so I'm basically saying, whatever you're talking about, I don't want to hear that shit. It's just crazy to me. And so at some point, very, very early, I didn't allow you to sleep in your crib. You slept with me in my bed. You would wake up, I would feed you, and we'd both go back to sleep. Now, I know there's people out there thinking like that's super dangerous and blah, blah, blah. Listen, if you are sleeping so hard that you're going to roll over your child in bed, like... Listen, you need to bottle that kind of sleep and sell it because it never happened. Actually, my daughter slept with me for a long time. So much so that when she transitioned kind of into the next phase of like toddler, it was very difficult for her to go to sleep without me sleeping by her side. But it's okay. That's one thing about infancy. I saw something about this on Threads the other day, so I'll mention it about breastfeeding. There's a lot of, again, mothers get beat over the head all the time with all these things they're quote unquote supposed to do. And breastfeeding is one of them. Now, I happen to be somebody who does support breastfeeding. I think that it is great when you can do it. but the when you can do it is the qualifier. Like, it is actually hard. You and your baby kind of need to be on the same wavelength because you can't communicate. And so, like, how do you latch on? When is the baby hungry? When has the baby had enough to eat? Like, what are you eating? And making sure, like, there's so much that goes into it that it's like, what did the woman say? The best baby is a fed baby. And that's the long and the short of it. Feed your baby however you need to. If that's breastfeeding, great. If it's not, great. Make sure your baby has nutrition, I think is the long and short of it. Those are the two that I'll address for infancy. I know I said 3, but I don't remember what the third thing is. That is standard old woman stuff. So we can move on to the next era.
Okay. Speaking of things seen on Threads, I saw this video recently of like these triplets trying to get their bottles, but their parents had like taped up a bunch of stuff on the wall. And it was supposed to be like some type of brain development, like obstacle situation going on where they have to figure out how to get the bottle without being able to pass through because there's tape. And these 3 babies obviously had 3 different personalities. And the one that stood out to me the most was the one that tried first and got so frustrated that he started crying. And then when his other brothers figured it out, he tried to do the same thing they did. It didn't work for him. He kept crying. And so when the brothers tried to give him the bottle, he didn't want it because he was just too busy crying. Everybody was honestly being really shitty to this kid in the comments. It was awful. And me, I was like, he's obviously crying because he wanted to figure it out himself. Like, it was a problem that he wanted to solve for himself. He didn't really want to be handed the thing after the fact and like just be cool with not having figured it out. It was like frustration, but obviously it's like toddler, so he can't really speak. He can only just express himself in the way that he knows how to. But I was definitely that kid. Frustrating things made me cry. Honestly, frustrating things still make me cry. I mean, I'm always gonna figure it out. Things annoy me when I can't find the pattern immediately, or when I tried a pattern that worked for somebody else and it didn't work. We can move on to like toddlerhood, so like 3, 4, like when kids are starting to learn how to not write, maybe me. But not most. Walk, talk, yeah, speak, read on the low. She always says I was a very fast developing child, but it was completely circumstantial because she had me in law school classes with her. Like, I don't know what else is really supposed to happen if I'm sitting in, was it a Civ Pro class at 4. I'm kind of gonna absorb some of that. But yeah, what were some of the parameters around me being around that age?
Again, like, part of the reason why I loved every age is because just how you were discovering the world at each age was just so intriguing to me. I just was gripped. Well, what did the kids say? I was sat. And so, yes, it's true that she was exposed to a lot of legal things. I started law school when she was 18 months old. And so this actually reminds me of a few different things that I did when you were around this age. One is because I was like studying or doing something that I needed to be alone to do for a lot of the time, I would do 2 things. One is I would never let her watch anything on TV that I hadn't pre-watched myself. And 2, I always played the closed caption because I figured, like, Fisher Price made millions of dollars on Sight and See. So there must be some secret to her being able to see the words and hear them all at the same time and then, like, watch how people interact to the words. And that actually is why, before she was even 4 years old, she was able to read. And, like, not like sight read, like actual read the captions on the TV. And I kind of knew that it was because of that, because she'd say stuff to me and she'd use a word and I'd be like, that word is not part of my vocabulary. Where did she get that word from? And then I'd like sit and watch, I don't know, Dora the Explorer with her and I'd be like, oh, because Dora uses that word 30 times in an episode. So that kind of thing. The second thing that happened is she didn't always like being out in the living room watching the TV by herself. And so I'd be on the bed in the room, like reading torts or something, and I would just start reading it out loud to her. And any lawyer in the audience knows that that's going to put that baby to sleep. Put me to sleep too sometimes. And so she's getting all the words that she sees on TV in these contexts where she's understanding, the context and how people relate to those words. And then she's getting, law school level vocabulary by me reading torts to her. I'm sorry if that gave you any nightmares, baby doll. We never really talked about that. I don't know, but torts. Anyway, and then the other thing that I would say about this part of her life is that she was much bigger, maybe, than she should have been for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. She was very well spoken for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, and she could read. And so people often thought that she was older than she was. And I'd have to remind people, she's a baby still. I know she's presenting to you like she's 7, but she's 4. Please remember that. This happened so much that by the time she was 5, she would just say to people, I'm 5. To help them reset what they were looking at and what she actually was. And so, yeah, I think that's all I'll add for the toddler piece.
I don't know if it necessarily gave me any nightmares. I just think I tolerate people a lot less now that I'm an adult. And it's crazy that the closed captions situation ended up being beneficial, because one of the things that I find most saddening about Gen Alpha, right, the kids today, is the fact that so many of them are iPad kids. They have these screens and stimulating media to engage with in order to keep them occupied, but for some reason it's dampening their cognitive abilities as opposed to enhancing them. I don't know if that's necessarily just a content thing, right? Because you pre-screened everything, and things these days are much easier to sneak subliminals in kids' content. It's weird. They watch TikTok, so their attention span is quite short because, it's only a few seconds long. But yeah, it's interesting how a 10 or 12 year difference can make something engaging with media that you can also read be a benefit versus a detriment. So yeah, anybody out there who just gives their kids iPads so they can occupy themselves and be left alone, just try a sketchbook or something. Literally a blank page and some crayons. There's only so much Cocomelon and Miss Rachel we can do. I don't know. You want kids to be able to retain information, not just receive it as distraction. Maybe you could use a blank sketchbook also. See what pops up. No, I'm serious. People usually say that when they have kids, they're reconnected with their inner child because then they're doing a whole bunch of things that they used to do when they were kids. So I know it's easy to be on our phones all day because that's how we interact with the world now, but maybe you need to be reminded what it's like to play or something. Really play. Go outside. Go to the metal slide. They still have metal slides. I don't know why, but those kids are still fucking their legs up on a hot summer day on those metal slides. This one's kind of odd, but I feel 9 is a good spot to hop to next, because then I would have gone through a few years of grade school already. And I'm on the precipice of being some type of adolescent, And it's also around 3rd grade is when a lot of national tests take place to see if kids are where they're quote unquote supposed to be at in terms of their schooling and whatnot. So I feel there's a whole lot of litmus tests that goes around for 9-year-olds, which is odd. But if anything, you want to throw in that conversation.
To be perfectly honest, I'm not even sure where to start because so many things happen 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. An example would be I sort of got in an argument with your 3rd grade teacher because she tried to give you a grade. So the grades were weird. For purposes of this conversation, I'll say it was a C, so people kind of understand. And based on what we just told you, this child ain't never gonna see in her life. So the issue was that G came to me and was basically, I don't understand this grade. And for me, the issue was that she didn't understand it. So I went to the teacher to kind of be hey, help me understand how she got this grade. And she went to explain to me that they had taken a single test. This is third grade, y'all. Had taken a single test that for whatever reason Gabrielle didn't do a great job on, and that this grade was based off that single test. And I lost my ever loving mind, because mind you, I probably had just graduated from law school not too long before this happened. And law school, honestly, I think was the first time I had gotten a like whole semester or a whole year grade based on one test. And you're telling me my 7-year-old, my 8-year-old, my third grader is getting a grade based on one test? That was no good for me. And so a lot of what I found is that like Gabrielle had obviously developed, she was in third grade, but she was reading on 5th grade level thanks to Torts and Dora the Explorer. And like the teacher would say things to me like, I think your expectations for your daughter are too high. And I wanted to be like, the third grader who's reading on a 5th grade level, that my expectations are too high. Like, what are you trying to tell me, woman? Now, we're not going to get into the race of it all, because I do think that definitely played a role. But at the end of the day, I knew everybody. I was very involved in my daughter's school, so I was like, okay, you think that I'm just going to let this slide? And I'm not. I'm going to go talk to the principal. I'm going to go talk to the founder. I'm going to go talk to the person on the board, because, I don't know, I'm on the board. So it just was like a place where I found that, beside the fact that she was obviously very developed, that I really still had to fight for her, really was kind of, I think, like the bridge to me becoming a parent advocate, because I was like, if I need to fight this much, lawyer, law school, brilliant child, for my daughter to get like have a decent relationship and get decent grades in school, how much more do parents whose kids are actually struggling, or maybe it's a single parent with multiple kids and they just don't have the time and the effort or the bandwidth to have these arguments with the teacher every day. Like, that really sent me into my parent advocacy. I think the only other thing I want to talk about during this time is a story I feel like I tell her a lot, which is, I remember that the school counselor had come talk to me one day and was like, hey, so I hold this circle, I don't know, I think it was once a week for the 4th grade girls, and today they were talking about like relationships, like liking this boy or liking that boy, or this boy doesn't like me, or so and so has a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And she was like, I just want to reassure you that, I let them know that that's not the kind of thing that they should be thinking about, and et cetera, et cetera. And I stopped her and I was like, why would you do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. These, I think it was 4 or 5 of the girls, came to you all with one theme, one topic that they wanted to talk to you about this week, and it was about relationships. And instead of validating their reality, you told them that this is not something they need to think about. That is exactly the kind of thing that causes kids to go talk to other people about these things that they really should be talking to you about. So like, I was able to kind of reprimand her in that moment, sorry. But also like apply that to my own life and realize that like, if I didn't stay open to hearing hard things or things I didn't want to hear from my daughter, I was virtually pushing her to go talk to somebody else about those things. I took that lesson to heart, and I tried to really keep that like in the front of my mind as she got older.
That story is interesting to me now, because I feel like going to an adult about that is an interesting choice for a kid. And also it was like my first like introduction to the way that like culture is so like compulsory heterosexual. Yeah, I don't remember how I felt about that situation, but there's definitely a small part of me that was like, do I have to like boys? Like because in grade school when everybody's like doing like their kid dating thing, it's just all so performative also. So I think I had lots of questions, not enough vocabulary around it, and was also just kind of like, I think I did have a level of just like disinterest also. I was just kind of like, this is weird, but in order for me to feel like I can keep up socially, which wasn't always wasn't an issue necessarily, but was just something that was always in the back of my mind. I just felt like, okay, I guess having a boyfriend is next. The next age, era, phase, moment, I suppose, is 12, middle school, 12, 13, rather, middle school, right in the mix of all of the new hormones and so much bullshit. I don't know. She always says the whole world is 7th grade, and I think she might be right, but hopefully and thankfully I'm not going through puberty the entire time. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the scripts around tweens is like, don't let them sass you, or try to protect them from things, or I don't know. There's even the script that, like, when they're asking you about hard questions about menstruating or relationships, it's like you have to use like euphemism, and it's awkward for everybody involved. You gotta use colorful language to kind of speak around the thing, because using the literal words would make them cringe, or I don't fucking know. Like,
did you feel like I did that?
I don't really remember having a conversation about my period before I got it. I remember learning about it in school, but I think I got it the summer before 6th grade. So that was not terribly helpful. Yeah, I don't really remember a whole lot of relationship, body, autonomy, physical conversations during that time, because I feel like you kind of got ahead of the curve with a lot of that stuff.
So I think that the middle school thing is a big piece of where I really just defenestrated all the scripts, because I think it's around the age where people start to talk about like, oh, you have a teenager, or you have a tween, or, you know, she's going to be sassy and she's going to be mean. And this is where your relationship with your daughter, right? Mom to daughter. This is where this relationship gets really hard. And I'm sorry, friends, I have to disappoint you. First of all, my relationship with my daughter has never been hard. Not then, not as a later teenager, not now. And I think that some of that honestly has to do with me just fucking loving being a mom. It's like really my favorite thing in the world. And my daughter is my favorite person in the world. And like, when you genuinely feel that way, it's good. Now, I know I gotta give this disclaimer. I'm not saying that every parent feels that way. I'm not saying that every parent should feel this way. Like, there is a lot of stuff out there about like how moms in particular feel about their kids, and I don't really want to get into that, because some of that I do think is a little suspect. Like, you should love your kids at the very least. But yeah, so I did kind of get ahead of the curve in some of these things, because when she was a little bit younger, 10, 11, I kind of just said, one, you ask me a question, I'm always going to tell you the truth. I'm never going to lie to you. That probably meant there was a lot of questions she was like, I'm just not going to ask, because I'm not sure I'm ready or want to know the truth about this thing. But then the other thing is, I've always been very intentional about modeling the behavior I want her to mimic. Like, you know, I guess growing up was, you know, do as I say, not as I do. And I talk about a script. I immediately threw that script out the window, and I was like, no. I'm going to model for you the kind of person I want you to be, because I know that what I do influences you far more than what I say. And so, yeah, I think that meant that there were certain things, like we never sat down and had like the period conversation, right? Like, if she had a question about it, I'd answer her question and she'd like walk away. So there was never, she just wasn't the kind of kid who wanted to sit down and have like a whole debate about a thing. It was like, I've got this one question real quick. I'd answer her question real quick, and then she'd be like, cool, and then go away, and then come back maybe a week later, a month later, who knows, with whatever question was next. I also felt like the approach that her school was taking to just development and puberty and all those things was actually really progressive and done in a way that I thought was appropriate. And I liked the idea that the kids could be together and felt free to ask questions together. And so I wanted her to be able to enjoy that space without it being maybe corrupted by, well, my mom said, right? Like, I wanted her to be able to come home and ask me questions instead of taking what I said to the classroom. I guess the other thing that I'll say is, yeah, middle school is hard, y'all. And this is probably the point in my motherhood where I really dug into the idea that's apparently revolutionary. I don't know, that kids are people. We still honestly treat kids like property. Honestly, we treat them like they belong to us, like they are ours, and everything about their life belongs to us. If there is ever a script that I'm just going to really hate and get on a soapbox about, it is that. Kids are little people. They have their own ideas and opinions about things. And the truth of the matter is, they see the world in a very different way than we do. And so to treat them like they're walking fucking widgets is crazy to me. And so, really leaning into her taking control over her education and being really responsible, for her homework and in her classroom and those kinds of things. But also being like, take a mental health day. If you're such a good student that if you don't complete this homework assignment, it doesn't matter what your teacher says, they'll probably give you an extra day. Like, just trying to help her navigate school like an adult, like a person who has to take care of themselves. I think for me that felt really groundbreaking because that's not a model that I had seen before. And I guess I am just curious for you, baby girl, like, how did that feel? Did that have like an impact on you that you can feel now as an adult?
I feel like I was always a self-sufficient kid. I feel like mainly because I was an only child, so I had to entertain myself a lot, especially when you were like at work or doing anything. And I don't know. I honestly don't feel like that really sunk in until I was an adult. Like, it wasn't going to be easy trying to dismantle the idea that me being a good student was what made me, worthy of X, Y, and Z while I'm still in school. Middle school, no less. I really have to still go through high school. Goodness. So, yeah, I kind of was able to take the mental health advice with a grain of salt just because I was probably the hardest person on myself just about performing well in all the different things that I was doing. I'd been high achieving for many years at that point, like retorts, like I was debating at 10 years old, like formal debate, like rebuttal formal debate in Penn in the basement with kids who were all older than me, and I was able to keep up and dominate the situation. So me being at the highest level possible in any aspect of school or any aspect of an extracurricular activity was kind of important to me feeling special. She was always going to tell me I was special at home, and I just wanted to make sure that I gave myself a leg to stand on in the outside world. I did kind of underestimate what it meant to have a leg to stand on. I was kind of trying to build myself furniture. And that was the result of, or that was the catalyst for a lot of burnout really early. Didn't stop me from continuing carpentry. But I think I'm better at handling it now. And just also about kids being their own person had to be especially emphasized in our household because, once again, I look just like you. I've been Lil Edie, mini me, my whole life, still, as an adult, Lil Edie to some. And I don't know. I think that put extra, or that, I think that encouraged you to go the extra mile to make sure I knew I was my own person. Because if not, then I would just like echo the things I suppose I was told to be. I feel like the next era would obviously be like legit teen, so 16. My being 16 was not normal. Let's just put that out there. I was not a normal 16-year-old. Or maybe I was. I feel like the idea is that kids that age, like juniors in high school, or they're reaching for independence, they want to drive, they want to extend their curfew to be with their friends, and whatever other cliches there are. My reach for independence was living in Central America by myself, which was obviously not normal. But yeah, I'll get ahead of the story. Living down there was definitely a pivotal moment in my life, and I was living with other moms. I suppose I had two moms in that house. My formal host mother, who was the mother of another woman living in the house, who had her daughter living in the house. So there were 3 generations in the house. So the first daughter was around the same age as my mom, so she acted more as like a mom to me than the real house mother, but I still got all that maternal energy going on. They were not big fans of me for a multitude of reasons. First one, just me being black and confident, even though I didn't feel confident. I think they still felt that and felt a sense of like threat. When I entered the house, they felt threatened, exposed, like they were being seen. And then that whole year definitely showed me another level of what it means to parent to some people. Their methods were not ideal. I believe to an extent they did care about me, but it was all shown through force. Not physical force, but I think the most prevalent thing about the way that we interacted was that same thing my mom was talking about earlier, about how I came off as older to people than I actually was. And because I had at least the courage to go live somewhere else for a year and learn a new language and be just in a different culture, it came off to them like I would be more of an adult on top of me being black, so them having their own preconceived ideas of what black girls were supposed to be like. And so they treated me like an adult, but not in the same way that my mom treated me like an adult, like in the way that I'm going to speak to you plainly and honestly because I respect your desire to know things and to understand things and want to give you everything so that you can go into the world feeling prepared. It was more like, you don't know this. If you want a man to love you, for example, insert script here, 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 here. If you want to make all this money that Americans make, if you want to, if you want to be seen as like beautiful and desirable by the world and the white men that we also want, you can catch that actually, then like tighten up. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're not doing enough. You're not saying enough. You don't really seem strong enough to be here. Like, I would cry a lot, especially once I first got there, because I had never really spent that much time away from my mom. Like, she would send me off to Girl Scout camp for a week in the summer, for a few summers in a row. Would still hate that. So imagine the entirety of a school year, literally miles and miles and miles and miles and miles away in a language I did not know. They were just very unimpressed by my hesitancy to assert myself. There were lots of reasons for me to be unsure and for me to be cautious and, try and seek out the type of comfort that I had at home or the type of like community that maybe I could feel. And they were very much like, no, that's not how the world works. And also, even if there was grace to extend, you don't really seem like you're super deserving of it. So me at 16, trying to understand myself, grow into myself, I also had to run into a different manifestation of what people thought it meant to mother or to like guide into adulthood, and that was just messy boots. Shout out to my therapist for helping me break all that shit down since, because it definitely needed a lot of deplatforming in my own mind, because as unideal as it was, a lot of that experience kind of did undo what my mom was trying to instill in me in terms of, you know, being a young black adult in the world who has everything open to them, you know? She's always saying the opposite of oppression is choice, and she raised me to believe I had many choices, and then I went someplace else for a prolonged period of time, and they made me feel like I had no choice in anything. Not inside the house, not in the city center, not in the Capitol when we would go. Like, there was a blueprint that I had to stick to in order for them to give me love in the way that I was used to receiving it. And if I didn't meet those standards, then I didn't receive it. So yeah, that was kind of fucked up of them. I would pass the mic to my mom so she could talk about how all of that made her feel, but then we'd be sitting here for a very long time. Don't even know if we will be able to stay on topic. So let's move on. Moving on to 18, when it was time to kick me out the house. I'm kidding. Most people are not kidding when they say that, but she was not trying to kick me out the house. If anything, she was trying to keep me in the house. Very much. Thoughts?
It's so funny because as we're having this whole conversation, every time we talk about a new like age of child, I'm like, oh yeah, there are some real good scripts behind that. But I now realize that part of the reason why I thought this was such a good idea to begin with is because there's so many scripts behind every era, and I have a soapbox in every era. And the soapbox in this era is like, pardon my French, but why the fuck are you kicking out your 18-year-olds? Like, I get it. They're adults. Whatever. Okay. So she goes off to college. And my biggest thing is, it was my job from 0 to 18 to make sure that when she went off to college, she had the capacity and the facility to make good decisions for herself, which meant that I could not make all of the decisions for her. This is actually something I tried to do like the whole way, you know, for her whole childhood, was to help her make good decisions. And so, you know, you can let your kid make decisions about anything, right? Like, if your 5-year-old wants to go to school in a tutu and rain boots and a camisole, unless it's dangerous, you should probably let them. Because you learn something about your 5-year-old. You learn something when that same 5-year-old decides to put on that tutu and those boots and that camisole again the next day. And you learn something about your 5-year-old when they leave the house in jeans, regular shoes, and an appropriate tee the next day, right? Allowing your child to be a little human and make decisions for themselves makes you a better parent. You get to learn things about your child that you wouldn't otherwise learn, because so much of what we call good parenting is projection. And if you can unlearn the script of projection as a parent, listen, I can't speak for you. What I will say is that for me, unlearning that, really wanting my child to be her own independent person, is why we can sit here and do this interview today. It's why we have such a good relationship, because she is wholly her own person. And so when you think about kids getting ready to go off to college, people are like, aren't you worried? Won't you be sad? Like, she's leaving the house. And I was like, well, no, I'm good, because I know she's going to make good decisions. You know how I know she's going to make good decisions? Because she's been making good decisions since she was 14, 10 really. But like, really decisions that matter, she's been making since she was 14. And so I have no concern that she's going to go off to college and start doing crazy stuff, because I understand how she makes decisions. Right? We've talked about how she makes decisions without me vetoing the decision she was made, so that she also needed to live with the consequence. Which, come on guys, it's so much better for your kids to live with the consequence of their bad decisions when they're still in your house than when they're over 18 and subject to the freaking law. So her going off to college, the biggest thing for me was I was going to be by myself. And like, that hadn't happened, like, truly. You know, she went abroad for a year, and that was pretty hard because I'd never actually lived by myself until that point. But I wasn't worried about her. I was more worried about the people around her. Like, y'all say something crazy to her, I might need to come up there. In terms of like the whole kick your kid out of the house thing, I think that's crazy. Not only is that crazy because I think that Americans are the only culture who still regularly say, you're 18, you're an adult, you don't need to be in this house anymore, or things like, if you can't live by my rules, you can't live under my roof. Okay, whatever. So I think it's really interesting that we're the only culture that still does that, because most of the other cultures in the world don't. And that's just like, put that in a bubble and put it to the side. The next biggest thing for me is like, this economy is crazy. Why would I ever say, oh, well, the job market is awful, the housing market's awful. You know, you listen to millennials screaming and crying about how they can't afford a house. That's a whole generation ahead of you. But sure, go ahead and try and make this on your own out there. I look around to the Gen Z kids, and I don't know any of them that live on their own. They live with roommates, or they live with family. Some of them live with family that they'd rather not live with family. Some of them live with roommates because they'd rather live with family, but they can't. Like, there's so many different parts of this, so that when my daughter graduated, I was just like, please stay home. I mean, there were some other things too, in that because she was such a high achiever, she'd an associate's degree, could speak a whole nother language, and got a high school diploma in essentially 4 years. And so when she went off to college, she finished in 3 years. And I was like, girl, take a year off. First of all, you still got a year. And second of all, like, just enjoy being young and beautiful and super talented and a rock star, etc., etc., etc. And she went and did that. And I was very happy to be in a position in my life and financially to be able to provide that to her. I had no reason for her to go out and struggle her way through American society.
You told me yesterday that we're at 55% friend and 45% mom. So I guess that's just a result of me staying home for real, and me becoming like a young adult at home, and you basically turning into my roommate. Best roommate I've had so far. Shout out to you.
Yeah, because I still do all the cooking and cleaning and grocery shopping and driving, but we'll talk about that on another episode.
Or don't. I think we're cool without that. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything that you felt was worth including that we haven't gotten to?
I don't think so. As we kind of wrap up here, I have one question for you.
Okay.
Which is, you've done it a few times already in the episode, but I'm curious if you had any advice for parents out there, if there's any one thing that you think is really important that you either learned from our relationship or watching your friends navigate their relationship with their parents, and maybe specifically for moms, because that's what you have. What would it be?
I suppose it would be to let your kids be a little weird. I feel like in American society anyway, you know, you're born with an extra toe, cut it off. You have a habit as a young kid, knock it off. You know? why do you still, I don't know, why do you stutter? Just, I feel like, yeah, like sucking your thumb, even though, like don't suck your thumb, you'll get buck teeth. I feel like a lot of those quirks manifest in kids' personalities also, and I feel like in order to make parents feel better about themselves or about their kids' readiness to be in school and test and socialize and all this other stuff, their first inclination is to like correct the things that they think are wrong with their kid. And it's sad because then you're basically just encouraging your kid to conform to things that don't even work for you for real, because I know you be doing weird shit when you're by yourself. And even if there's like a tiny part of yourself that may judge you for it, like, you know, you do it for your own like comfort and regulating your nervous system. And like, all of our nervous systems are different for a reason. And so, and you'll find that life will get a little bit harder for the kid, just for them to express themselves and just situate themselves, because they're unable to lean into their quirks. They're going to figure it out as they get older. Like, the things that they want to embrace about themselves are all things that they already did as a kid. And so my advice would just to not suppress them or encourage them to suppress it at an early age, because that I just think it makes the journey to them figuring themselves out harder, and also kind of makes you a bit hypocritical. Or maybe you need to stop suppressing the things that make you weird. Because we all have weird habits. Nobody is 100% neurotypical. I think the idea of being neurotypical is another, like, propagandized lie. And so if your kid has little things that makes them feel better and that's kind of weird, you just kind of lean into it, and lean into it about yourself so that you feel less of a urge to correct something. Not everything needs editing, you know? Refrain from overcorrecting things, because then you're just going to knock it off its axis and whatever.
David All, you're the best. I love you so much. Thank you for indulging me and being part of this episode. And to all the moms out there, I hope you have an awesome day, that you get to do exactly what you want to do today. And we'll see you all again next month. Love you.
Happy Mother's Day.
Oh God, I'm old.
And that's the outro.